Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 37 in the 69 Mach 1 Cobra Jet series, also known as Slither. Now, if you've been following along, you already know that I started with a very rusty car, and I basically rebuilt that car using a lot of new parts and some of the original parts from the car. I did all that on a jig that I built from a boat trailer. I have some videos on that on YouTube as well about that. But I repurposed that boat trailer into a jig, and when I did that, I used two cars to verify my measurements and fitment. I used a 68 coupe. It's the same underneath as any other Mustangs, basically. I used a 68 coupe as a reference, and I also used the 69 Cobra Jet that I had, or started with, as a reference, and everything fit and lined up the way it should, so I'm happy with the results. The next step, I have to get it off of the jig, and to do that, I have to get the Studebaker off of the lift, get the Mustang situated onto the lift, get it off the jig, pull the jig out, and then put the car on a rotisserie. Now I have a rotisserie here that I bought from Redline Stands based out of Pensacola, Florida. I'm going to do kind of an unboxing video and also assembly, and then try to get the car situated on that rotisserie. And from there, well, there's a lot more to do. I'll be working on the underside of the car, finishing up any welding that I need to do, grinding, all those sort of things, and I'm going to prep the bottom of the car, at least that's the plan, get it in seam sealer, and try to get epoxy primer and all that sort of thing on it. The big step, though, is getting it off of the jig. Okay, now all I have to do is get the trailer out of here, and I can get started on putting together that rotisserie. Alright, we're going to get started on this. Obviously, I have to do some unboxing here, cut some straps, get it opened up. Ta-da! Now what I want to do is lay out everything so we can see exactly what's in the box. So let's just do a quick look inside the box. So everything is wrapped in bubble wrap that I can see. Some nice heavy pieces, the roller wheels. All the other pieces are going to have to be assembled. And it looks like we've got, I don't know if it's a parts list or assembly instructions. So it is recommended that before beginning the assembly process, you lay out everything in an open area, separate it into groups, all nuts, bolts, arms, and any other pieces. Step 1, start by bolting arm to main stand. So there's a picture. More pictures, how to piece the center pieces together. And so basically it looks like there's just pictures that showing it assembled, and there's a blow up of it, so that might help as well. And on the back here, here's all the numbers that correspond to these numbers on the front. So I'm gonna lay everything out. So it's unboxed, and according to the parts list, it looks like everything is here. Now let me point out real quick, you're probably going to hear some background noises. My neighbor's cutting down some trees, and I apologize for that in advance. So as we look through these pieces, you can see they're all powder coated, nice big roller wheels. There's some center casters that should support the middle section where these two pieces will connect. There's rollers in various locations, so there's some here at the top, and that'll be for the interaction of these pieces as they all go together. There's also locking pins hanging on chains, so that'll be handy. And I'll also point out that these pieces are part of an accessory kit. Now I bought these when I bought this assembly because it comes with stuff like these shackle mounts, and you can attach those directly to the shackle points on a car where your leaf spring would connect. And these other pieces are designed for your adaptation. So if you want to add some structure or weld or bolt, you can use these pieces as kind of sacrificial pieces, let's say. So I'm going to go through the assembly process. It'll probably be time-lapse for the most part, and once I get it to a point where I need to point something out, I'll stop, shoot some video on that, and tell you what's going on. Well, I have the two ends built, at least the bases, and I want to show you what goes in the center here. So you'll notice it has these bolt holes, or nuts welded on, let's say, and you have this piece with a nut welded and a nut welded just on one end, and this piece with a nut welded on both ends, and then you have two slip sleeves. Basically what this does is allows you to change the length tremendously. So you take this piece, it goes inside that tube, this piece inside that tube, and you have lock bolts on top. Then this piece acts as a connector. So you can take this long piece, put it into this one, this long piece, put it into that one, and then this connector goes in between. And this gives you a pretty infinite length. How about that? You like that trick? Pretty infinite length for what you can stretch this out to or shorten it to put a car on it. So I'm going to get that together next. I will also point out that the bolts that hold that together at the end there required a 7/8 and a 13/16. The bolts in the center required a 9/16, and the bolts here to hold the casters required an 11/16. The next part of the instructions say to install the lifting stand along with the bottle jack. So that's going to take the larger bolts and washers. The bottle jack mounts to that plate there, and then the top of the bottle jack will go into this part of the lifting stand. Also point out that this has a roller on the base of it, and this roller here interact with each other whenever it's in there, so it can move up and down even with a slight bind on it. So that's good. Okay, the next part is probably going to be a little more complicated. You have this part here with the adjusting screw jack on it, and basically that will insert into the main piece up here. This piece slides on, this pin goes here, and then this pin is on a rotating cam type system, and that's spring loaded, so it pushes that way automatically, and I'll show you that more in just a second. However, this part has the threaded rod on it, and that is for the height adjustment, and it also has these bearing surfaces. Okay, so you'll see there's about 5 pieces that make up one set. So you have a kind of a wear washer, a hardened surface, the bearing race, another hardened surface, and then another washer. Now, it doesn't show you specifically how this goes together, but the way I'm looking at it is you have this hole right there that it goes through. So you're going to need one set of these on one side and one set on the other, because the square tubing should fit between here, and these bearing surfaces help resist friction, let's say. So what I need to do is assemble this piece with this piece, and part of that too is, if you'll notice up here, there is a secondary plate and there are some holes on the side of that post. So it all has to fit together, and I would say before it goes into the main assembly, because these long legs probably don't rotate through there unless you elevate it quite a bit. So I'm trying to keep from getting it too high at this point. I just want to assemble it, and I'll put this together and then put it into the lifting arm. This piece put the bearings back on, or the bearing assembly. Now I'm going to take one wrench and just put it on the end of the handle, the crank handle, and take this wrench, which is a 15/16, and tighten this up. It probably wouldn't hurt to put some grease on these just to help it turn. Same way with the main shaft right here. You can put some grease in that as well. Now what I want to do is take this assembly off. Again, you can lift this up and let this rotate, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to take this back apart, take these pins out, or this pin, one pin, remove the collar, and then I can slide this out, rotate it, put it back in. Now the collar, of course, has all kinds of hole settings on this, so you can index it however you want. This just slides on. Drop your pin through, put your clip in, and this part up here is a cammed, spring-loaded cam lock. So you can set this all the way over here and it'll stay out, but as soon as you release it, it's going to want to pop in. The nice part about that is you can have this a little bit of adjustment and know that if you let go of it, it's going to try to catch one of these pinholes. Now on the other side, we have to put these bolts in. So we have this plate right here that actually goes on in the other direction, but you can't put it in until you elevate. You'll notice I'm turning counterclockwise, and that's raising it up. This could probably be improved upon, as with anything, you know, you can find ways to make things better. I think some people put a power motor on these. I've heard of people doing that. You could probably even put a weld bolt up here, or a nut that you could put your screw gun on. So this goes like that, and this acts, I believe, as a stop, so you can't go any lower than this plate. So bring that up. You got two cap head or socket head, Allen head bolts, however you want to call it. We all know what they do. Okay, that's really the assembly. Now I'm going to show you some of the other pieces that have to be used to make this work. Yeah, this could be a little bit longer, this crank handle, but it is what it is at the moment. Now you've got 4 of these. These can go onto these arms. Gives you a left and right width adjustment. And those also require some captive bolts to lock them in left and right. Also 2 locations here. I assume that's just to help maybe lock it in for movement. I don't know if I would count on those to support that. Obviously you want to count on this rod. Now of course we have the jack over here that's going to raise up this part of the rotisserie. The lifting arm will come up and down, and you have 2 bolts that go in there. You also have that pin to help catch. Other than that, I think we're pretty close to being done. Okay, fully assembled. I wanted to point out a couple things. You know, these are the shackle adapters that I bought, and we're going to discuss these more in just a second. But they basically slide onto these arms, and of course you adjust this width to wherever you need it under your shackles. There is a pin here, and this will go through this center post as well. I talked about these. I didn't see this pin. That is a better catch, better safety. So there are holes indexed inside of here. I don't know what the spacing is on those, but I'm sure it's probably every 4 or 5 or 6 inches or something. So just as a safety catch. Of course I didn't show these, but these are the handles, solid bar stock. So you can get a lot of leverage out of that, or set it to the center. This was something that I was curious about. You know, I always want to have a place to put my jack handle. A lot of times I will weld something on where I can just slip it into a pipe or something like that. But this has these right there. I think that's fine. That'll solve the storage for the jack handle. Now let me show you something about the shackle mounts that I need to deal with. Okay, so under the car we have the shackle mounts, and that would of course have the rubber bushings in it normally, and the problem is this is just a little too narrow. I could probably spread that apart and make it work. If I can't, then I can come forward and use one of those bolt holes. That is where I put in the reinforcement filler piece for the dual exhaust, or for the exhaust hanger. So I could, in theory, use that as well. But I'm going to probably try to use that shackle mount. The reason being is I only have so much length. Like from the back of the car coming in, I don't want to be too far in and have this piece out at the end. So just trying to make sure I don't put it in an awkward position. Like if I have to come way out here, that's not going to work. So I have to be responsible and make sure that stays in. The other part of this is these pieces. Now these are almost ready to go, and I say that because I can basically just drill some holes and put the bolts right in through there and lock this in, and that'll give me the whole front piece. So that should be pretty simple. I can just replicate that whole pattern, and I will probably I don't know that I want to put a long bolt in there. I think I would rather use the shorter bolts, make a big hole on one side and a smaller hole on the other, so that I'm not having a bolt stretched out across that full width and also crushing this. I think that makes more sense. The alternative would be to put a piece of pipe inside of this and weld it in and then use the long bolt, but really it's not necessary. So I'm going to start prepping these so I can get them on the car. So here's the arm for the rotisserie, and what I have here, this is my jig arm that I made, and it already has the holes in it. So ideally I should be able to come up with a center line on this. This is 2-inch square tubing, so 1 inch on center, somewhere back here, come up with 1 inch, and this doesn't have to be completely dead on, but it helps. Now I used the reference on the car, this piece. This is the end of the front frame rail. This dead ends right there. So I don't want this up against that. That wouldn't make any sense, and it would be very, very tight. So what I want to do, and I know I'm just being ballparking here, is about 3 fingers width. In my case, that's what I'm looking at, is about 3 fingers. So if I do that and I mark what I'm going to consider basically the center line of these bolt locations, then I can just start drilling. And of course it doesn't hurt to actually measure these things, you know, so you're on the money, but I feel like I can get it pretty darn close using that method. Yeah. So the plan will be to drill through all the way through this piece. I will step up the hole to match the size of the bolt right on. I want it tight, really tight. And then I will have to oversize this outer hole so that I can get a socket in there. So I have to figure out what my socket diameter is. I know it's a 5/8 socket, so that'll be the hole that I need to put the socket through to get to the bolt. Okay, so slight change of plan. I was drilling up the holes, upsizing to get the size for the socket, and I smoked the drill. It was really fighting with it. And I got to rethinking this a little bit, because I looked closely, or more closely, at this metal, and this is actually very thick. I don't see any reason why I can't go straight through and use the outer wall. For now, at least, that's what I'm going to do. So I went to Tractor Supply, and I got some 3.5-inch bolts, and those will go into those and go into the bumper mounts. Now, here's the fun part. What I found, look at this beast. This hole in the shackle mount is about 1 inch. And of course the hole in the spring shackle itself is also a little bigger than 1 inch. And I thought, what am I going to put in there? So initially I had an idea. I was going to take some square tubing, trim it down to where it would fit inside of the shackle hole or pipe on the car, just to take up some of the space. And then I got to looking at this, and I thought, well, what do I do here? Because you can put washers on, but I couldn't, this isn't going to fit. And I was trying to find some 1-inch pipe, couldn't find any pipe. And I thought, well, I'll go to Tractor Supply, because maybe I could use some air fitting, black pipe or whatever, to take up some of that space. But when I went to Tractor Supply, I stumbled upon these bolts. Now, that is a 1-inch bolt, grade 5, and essentially I end up with extra material because I wasn't sure what length I could get away with. And let me show you why. Because the distance available under here is only so much, right? So even trying to snake that in, it's not going to fit. So I'm going to have to cut this down. Hopefully I can make this work. I'm going to try. I really want it to work. It's because it'll take up so much of the space. On this side, there's plenty of room. I could put in the full-length bolt, and you can see there's still a little play there, but that's really trivial, I think, at this point. So let me see what I can do to shorten these up, or at least shorten up one of them. Okay, I tried. I really did. I took these and I spread them apart, and I'm able to get those around the shackle mount. Of course, this bolt, I cut it down to the bare minimum that I could. It'll go here without this in the way, but I can't, there's no way. I just can't get enough angle to clear this, and I'm not going to enlarge this hole any bigger than it is. And so I went back to the pipe idea, because my thought was if I could take up some of this slack and have a pipe in here, then I could just clamp it and it would do the same thing. That didn't work so well either because I couldn't find a pipe. Let me show you what I come up with though. So the object is to eliminate some of the play in this opening here. And initially I had come up with the idea, because I was concerned about, again, these, but I couldn't use the big bolt. So I have a smaller diameter bolt and some shouldered nuts. These were in my parts bin, and basically I can put these on there, right? And they go inside of that opening. There's still a lot of play though. So then I come up with part two. And again, I went to my parts bin and I found some, I don't know what size nuts these are, but I found some nuts that could go inside of there. Now you could make some bigger ones, but that worked as far as a dimension. And then I found these washers, which were about 1 inch. So basically I've created a filler piece inside of that. This could be, I could make it longer. I think I could have put one more nut in there, but basically that takes up that slack. So the configuration then becomes, I can take this, snake this in to that, take this other nut, the matching nut, bring it against that, line it up with the hole, and now I have minimal movement. So I'm happy with that. I can put a nut and a washer on this side, tighten that down, and it's locked in. So yeah, call it redneck engineering if you want, but that works. And now on the other side, I can still use that big bolt just like I had it, and it'll basically be the same thing. So here's the passenger side, and this is the bolt that I cut down. Good. All right. I did step these holes up one size. They were a little bit tight, trying to get it to be exactly, and it doesn't need to be exact on what we're doing here. So now and of course this isn't how you'd put this on. This would be on the bar, and then you set it in place, because you couldn't put this on the bar if it's bolted to the frame rail. Because when it comes time to actually hang the car, I don't need to be refitting this. And these are 3.5-inch bolts. I could have went with a 3-inch. Now that I look at it, I didn't need this length, but it's what I have. It's not going to hurt anything. Good. Well, I think I'm ready to try to make this work. So I have slid the front attachments that will go to the frame rails in the front onto the lifting bar, let's say. The ones in the rear, I'm leaving those on as well, and the plan is I will take this far enough back to bring it up and then slide it forward into the mounts that are now hanging from the shackles back there. So let's see if if I can make this happen. Okay, it is on the rotisserie, but it's still on the lift. Couple things, I had to keep adjusting that length, and that's a pretty good length. I'm glad they give you all that adjustment. What I did, of course, is move this as far aft as I could, insert it into the rear mounts, which it did just fine, and then move it forward and reset the front section. So once I loosened up some of those bolts and adjusted everything, I now have everything tight. Also, I wanted to point out, I talked about this jack handle, and I just realized this handle will also fit in there. So that's some great engineering. I like that. At this point, this is probably the learning curve. You have to figure out where this needs to sit so that it can rotate without it like trying to flip over and stuff like that. And that's a matter of adjustment. Now, as I said, I have this still on the lift. I'll probably lower the lift out a little and see what happens. See how it feels before I start making any adjustments on the threaded part. Because I have both the front and the rear at the same height. All these are jacked up at the same height. I'm in the 4th hole to safety pin it, so if it did jack failed, it would sit on that pin. And the only real adjustment at this point, I think, is this jack screw. So I'm going to lower the lift and see what it does. Okay. It's on the rotisserie. You see how it feels. So I get the impression that it's bottom heavy right now. So if that's the case, I guess I need to go bring it up a little more. Now I will say, I don't like these. This really takes some effort to turn this. So that could be improved if you put a longer handle there, or if you made it like a ratchet, so you could put a stud or something on top of that, so you could turn it with a ratchet. It would be a lot easier. We're close. We're pretty darn close. Well, it's still just a little bit bottom heavy, but it didn't take much effort to get it up on its side, so that's cool. That is very cool. I'm excited about this. This seemed to work just fine using my adapter there and the giant bolt down there. I tried to make sure I had spacing pretty close on both of these, and then obviously trying to get the center squared away. So I probably won't leave it like this, that would be silly, but it's cool to see it on its side. Yeah, that'll make it easier to clean stuff up. The only hiccup that I can see right now is that little wheel right there has to come over this plate. So do the big wheels, which isn't as big a concern, but that will be a little bit of a problem. I may have to, I don't know, this has a taper to it. I may have to come up with something just to help it transition over, because obviously that's going to have to flex some to make that happen. So I'll figure it out. Well, there it is. It's now on the rotisserie. It's been a long day. It's now 8:30 tonight. But I was so excited. I wanted to get this thing on and make sure it worked, and I got it all done basically in one day. So I'm pretty happy about that. Now, this stand is available on the Redline Stands website. I'm going to post a link to that. So if you're interested in checking out this stand or any of the other equipment that they have, which they have a lot of stuff, I will have a link for that so you can check them out as well. I have met the owner of the company. I know that he uses this himself. He's a car guy, and so he builds some cool stuff. So I know he used this in his own shop, and I feel like it's going to be very, very, very useful. I really do. I'm so looking forward to getting it on its side, grinding out welds, removing the EDP coating from the inside of the frame rails, all that sort of thing, and prepping the bottom of the car. The end goal here is to get everything sealed, welded, or well, I should say get everything welded, make sure everything's all taken care of at the bottom, get the seam sealer in, get the primers on, and just be done with the bottom of the car. And then I can go back to working on the doors and fenders and make sure all that's going to end up being correct. The other thing that I'll have to do is come up with suspension parts, because I'm going to put the original rear end back underneath it. I need to put in control arms and all that sort of thing, so it's mobile. I can't leave it on the rotisserie and it's not going back on the jig, so it's going to have wheels on it and all that sort of thing. So anyway, thank you for watching, and especially I want to thank my patrons. You know, I mentioned it before, YouTube doesn't really care what I do. So the patrons who are supporting me, thank you, thank you, thank you. That really motivates me to keep on going. Now, with that said, I am adding videos to my Patreon page. I'm taking my old videos and I'm re-editing them, condensing them somewhat so they're more concise, and loading them onto Patreon. Now, that may mean that I end up pulling the ones off of YouTube, because it really doesn't benefit me anymore to have them on there. So if you're interested in becoming a patron, there's a link in the description below. If you're interested in any of the tools or anything that I show on my channel, or if you are interested in buying stuff off of Amazon, there are links in the description below. Everything helps, so thanks. And that'll be it for now. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.